Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I'll talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural, the latest episode of Legacies, as well as the latest episode of Evil. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Legacies and/or this week's episode of Evil. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So for what's really interesting is obviously we see that little shimmer of some interesting kind of shimmer of okay, someone's in a bunker with them and everything, and it's oh, who is that? What is that? Sam goes on a run, and lo and behold, who is it? Eileen. I'm like, holy crap, didn't see that coming. But once again, my whole thing I brought up before, this being the final season, we're kind of going back through stuff we haven't really tackled in a while. I'm like, oh my god, it's so good to see her again, and I'm like, holy shit. But at the same time, it's well, shit, because now we see that she's basically in the same boat that Kevin was in, because it's oh, so she ended up going to hell because of the whole hellhound situation, and it's oh, do you have an angel friend that could give me the hookup so I can go to heaven? But it's they recently learned with Kevin, once you've been to hell, you can't go to heaven because there have to be exceptions that God makes, and he's made those exceptions in the past, but he's not making those exceptions now because he's playing his own game and they've kind of pissed him off, and so that's a whole complicated thing. So now it's a sucky situation because obviously Eileen doesn't want to stay on this plane too long, because if she does, this plane of existence is what I'm saying, because if she does, she'll turn into an evil spirit that will attack people. She doesn't want that, but she's sure as hell not going back to hell. So that's kind of a tough situation to be in. Obviously, Dean kind of suggests putting her kind of in a soul capturing thing of just keeping her there because it's better than going to hell and it's better than turning, to a evil spirit. So, but obviously for Sam, it's nah, man, Eileen is, she's one of us. We have her past and everything. She's a hunter. She died on the job and everything. So it's it's not right for her to have to, pay in that regard. It's we should, she deserves better than that, essentially. So they go to the only place they know how to kind of, get the magic they need to make this happen, and that's at Rowena's place, which at the beginning of the episode we saw some witch kind of breaking into Rowena's place, tossing the place and everything. I'm come on, Rowena's dead and everything. She made a great sacrifice and you're just doing that. I mean, I get it, but I also like the fact is that Rowena's place is trapped. I wondered if she specifically trapped it like that. Oh, I mean, she knew one day she was going to die, but I'm sure it was meant to be a trap of anytime she's away, someone tries to barge in, and I like that. It's the spell is meant to kill anyone that goes in, so it ends up killing the witch from the beginning of the episode. There was this interesting conversation a little bit between Sam and Eileen that I thought was kind of interesting, because it's the whole conversation of he gets it, obviously, her time in hell was rough. He's I get it. It's not something that ever really leaves you, because it's right, he's been to hell too. Dean has as well. It's yeah, it never quite shakes away, especially because Sam has a very unique situation in hell. He was in a cage locked between Lucifer and Michael, and literally kind of having his soul kind of basically being their kind of plaything, kind of caught in the middle of their cage fight, so different circumstances, but even he recognizes, yeah, hell's kind of a messed up thing, and even Eileen was she's not ready to talk about it. So I should also point out some familiar faces in this episode. I'll get to it later, but Melly, the actress that, the mom that Cass met, that's the actress who played most recently Grace in Travelers. I'm so there's that. The actress who played the witch mother, that she most recently that I can think of, she's popped into so many things, but I think the most recent thing I want to say was maybe playing the Blue Fairy in Once Upon a Time might be the most recent thing. And then there was the other daughter, who is, interesting enough, I was I saw her name is Jodelle Ferland. I think I saw that in the opening credits. I was that looks so familiar. And I was yeah, it turns out it is the actress who played Five in Dark Matter, which if you've never seen Dark Matter, I highly recommend you check out that show. It's a really good show. It sadly was canceled. It's a really good science fiction show. I think you can find all 3 seasons on Netflix, the last time I was aware of. But yeah, she played Five. And I'm it's also a little weird because as Five, she has shorter hair and her hair is green, so it's kind of crazy to see her with just longer brunette hair, so it kind of catches me. But it's like, 5, I lost my mind. I was like, dude, that's so sick. But regardless, Sam ends up going to Rowena's place, and I really like that it was kind of this touching moment, because even when they were suggesting for Sam to go to Rowena's place, it was kind of like you almost saw this hesitation, because he hasn't been to Rowena's place at all since she died. So it's like, it's, this is a friend and an ally who's gone now, that it's kind of like that, it's like, oh man, that sucks, so he's going through her stuff, and he sees all these journals she has. It's like, oh, she wrote down her life. She was writing down all this stuff even before, up to the point she died. And it hit Sam, because for one, it's like, well, he's the one that killed her, sure, but obviously that was her decision, but that weight still is there, because, Rowena was a friend and an ally, and especially because the witch later on explains, like, oh, anyone else that goes in that room would die except for Sam. I'm sure it applies for Dean and Castiel as well, but probably specifically for Sam, because she grew quite fond of Sam, They were basically fond of each other, It's like, I think Sam found kind of a witchy friend in, Rowena. And so being there is just a reminder of her being gone, and just, the sacrifice she made to save the world and everything. And I don't know, that was just kind of a beautiful, touching moment in that regard. But basically, they end up finding a spell that basically she was working on, like, because obviously the whole trying to bring their mom back wasn't something she was able to do, but she subsequently had been working on the spell more and more, but stopped because, like, well, the boys didn't want Mary back anymore, because she was in heaven, she was happy, she had found peace, so they didn't want to take that away from her anymore. They didn't want to take that away from her, so Rowena stopped on the spell. But Sam is like, there's enough here where I can finish up the spell and I can get you back your body. But obviously this witch wants to use it to bring back her now dead daughter. It's like, well, that was kind of on you, because you sent her in there into Rowena's place. But it's that whole thing of like, yeah, it was so interesting too, because she had even mentioned, like, yeah, she knew Rowena by reputation, but it's just kind of interesting to hear that, like, there is someone that she's felt held in high regard. The fact that she would make it so that Sam, who is a hunter, have access to her place, basically almost like passing her torch on to Sam in a certain regard. So I think that's something, and I think that's what they're setting up in this episode, because even Demon was joking around, being like, oh, what are you going to be, you were like Rowena's witch in training, so is that what you're going to do now? I'm like, well, he's always been the more magically inclined. Like, obviously, like, it's something they've dabbled in, but it's been something that Sam has kind of dabbled in the most. I think he's the one that's the most readied and studied about, and I think maybe that's what kind of clicked between him and Rowena, because Rowena maybe saw his potential. But that could be, like, Rowena's spells and stuff like that, and his affinity to magic and his connection to Rowena might play a part in this final season of him kind of tiptoeing to, like, doing some grand magic type of shit of, like, whatever he finds at Rowena's place, whatever she passed on to him, basically without him really knowing it, he'll probably have to really, like, go through her place to really find out, like, what, because eventually there's probably going to be other witches that find out Rowena's dead that decide to kind of ransack her place, so they're probably going to bring all that stuff to the bunker, I would assume. That's how I kind of chalk it up, but ultimately we'll see. But yeah, it was actually kind of sad, because Sam was trying to reach out to the youngest, who is played by Jadelle. It's her character's name is Emily. It's like, oh, he tried to reach out to Emily. It's like, hey, you don't want to bring back your sister. I get it. She was kind of like, you didn't have the best relationship, did you? He's like, I get it. My brother used to do stuff to me, replacing my toothpaste with glue or something like that. And she's like, yeah, she turned me invisible for a week, and then she turned my crush into a balloon and popped him. It's like, yeah, your sister sounds like an asshole. But I think it's probably like, yeah, but that's growing pains as a witch. That the fact is, oh, that's what witchy sisters do. We kind of taunt each other and mess with each other like that. But it's so interesting. She's kind of going along with this of being like, oh yeah, like I'll, help bring back my sister, even though you don't want to bring her back. And Sam tries to offer her, it's like, you help me get this spell, we use it, it's a one-time deal, your sister never has to come back. There's plenty of stuff here, Rowena, that you can go off and be off on your own. As long as you're not an asshole about it, I'm sure Sam would have let you go. They grew a bond with Rowena, but obviously Emily didn't want to listen, so things ended the way they did, with a clash of everything and everybody. Luckily Eileen shows up with Dean, and they help take down the witches, and I even love that Sam, using magic, ends up killing Mama Witch, and he's like, I learned from the best. And I'm like, oh, once again, it's just like, it's nice to kind of bring that all full circle of Rowena. Like I said, I think he is going to be carrying on her torch, so I think that is kind of a pretty nice element to it. And luckily, when it is all said and done at the end, Sam was able to bring Eileen back to life. And I'm like, yay! But immediately my brain was like, now where's the other shoe gonna drop? Because part of me was thinking like, okay, like the spell's gonna go wrong at the last minute and the episode's gonna end off on a huge bummer. It doesn't. It's like, yay, everything's good. Yeah. But my other side of my brain is like, they're gonna screw this like because let's not forget, what's her face read God's book, so she knows exactly how this story's supposed to play out, and she was like, oh my god, this is so messed up. Like, the fact is, he's going to give them a win just to take it away from him. It's like, oh, you got Eileen, you rescued, oh, you brought her back, they're like, oh, good on you. Just when the boys think they've got a win, God will come by and sweep it up. I think that's what's, and he either that or he's going to do something to her. He's tragically going to turn her into a monster, an enemy, and the boys had to kill her again. That, or maybe he'll just destroy her soul, so there's no even chance of even bringing her back. I don't know. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't drop this episode, but it will. What they'll probably do is let Eileen be around, kind of get readjusted, and then like either take it from her like this all away the next episode, or give us a couple episodes, or her being readjusted to life for a while, then bring her back into the story, and then she's going again. Because we know Chuck's got a very effed up plan planned for the Winchester, so I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop. I don't want it to, just because it's like, Sam felt like, because for Sam and Dean, it's that thing of like, everything just feels so out of your control. That's why Dean's just kind of like, who cares, whatever, like, we don't even have to look for God, he's going to find us, and he's so nonchalant about everything in this episode. But for him, because it's like, because even Sam's trying to put a positive spin on things and be the fact of the matter is what we do is important. You try, to tell me that before, but obviously, Dean's kind of very heartbroken knowing that God, it's like we thought we were clear, but God's back in the picture. And now it's the whole thing of like, God wasn't planning on me shooting him, which I don't think he was, because he didn't expect things to have the effect they did. But then again, it could be the thing of, because I don't think he's aware what that bullet wound is doing to Sam and bringing a connection. Maybe he is. And that's the point Dean's trying to get across of like, we don't know what's his plan and what's not, because it seems like basically everything we've ever done over the course of the series has been part of his plan. So what's to make this any different? But Sam brings up the point is, we've broken the rules all the time. Because I love he had brought this conversation up with Eileen of the fact is that Rowena knew that life was kind of stacked against you. No matter how powerful you are, no matter what the circumstances is, life was never going to be fair. So what did she do? She always broke the rules. She kept bringing herself back to life, finding a way to extend her life over and over again. So she always found a way to break the rules. And I think that's going to inspire them of like, we don't know how, but I don't know how, but Sam's like, we're going to do this. We're going to beat him in some shape or form, because the fact of the matter is we break the rules. When you look at everything they've accomplished over the years, they've broken the rules time and time again. But then you can also, once again, bring that argument that Dean brought up. It could have all been part of God's plan. So there's a complicated hook to that whole situation. So we'll have to wait, see where things kind of go on that front. On the other side of things, we do have the whole situation with Castiel, because for him, it's, he's off on his own kind of, I guess it seems like he's just kind of living a normal life away from all of this. But I think it's that aspect of once you're part of this world, it's like, wait, there was a body of this kid that was found. Oh, all the blood was sucked out of his body or whatever. It's like, okay, so he shows up at the police station and he's willing, because obviously he has his whole cover as an agent and whatnot. So he's trying to look into this case, and he meets the woman Melly, and it's trying to help her because her son's going missing, but no one's really listening, because the lady at the police station is like, oh, he's going to be gone a couple hours. Fact of the matter is, she'll show up again, but Cassio decides he wants to help her. It's like, I'm an FBI agent, quote unquote FBI agent. And so he, does his thing. And I think this is our first time ever really, Cassio has done stuff on his own, but I think this is the first time we've ever seen him really like full blown, like doing the paperwork, mapping stuff out, kind of see where the bodies ended up. Like, this is the first time we've ever seen that side of the investigation for him. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. And then when he's looking into things, Melly ends up following him. So it's like, all right, we'll try to find your son, which inadvertently, it led to an interesting conversation where basically Melly talks about the fact that she kind of had to walk away from her financing job, which, because Cassio brought up the fact is that, because him and his colleagues had a disagreement about management as well as a disagreement about each other. It led him to be on vacation, that he just needed to get away from everything. So I forgot what it was, because whatever the sheriff is, that's something they've come across before, and I just don't remember what kind of supernatural creature he is. It's something that's come up across the show before, but I don't remember. Luckily, they were able to find Melly's son, but the thing is, he caught... The moment they were like, oh, I didn't catch who it was, I'm like, it's going to end up being the sheriff or something. And lo and behold, it ends up being the sheriff. I like that it isn't like this complicated case of trying to figure it out. It's like very kind of one and done, because I guess it's a smaller part of just kind of pushing Castiel's story along, but it's still a very important part, because it's like, he's trying to tell Melly, it's like, the fact of the matter is there's monsters out there. And part of me was also worried, because I figured the blood drain, I was like, oh, it must be a vampire. And I was like, oh man, she's going to find her son. I mean, but then again, I was like, well, the fact is they did that storyline already, so would they be doing it again? Well, I mean, that's just vampirism in June, because I was about to say, like, she'll find her son, he's a vampire, and that's a whole complicated thing. But remember, there was, once again, the actor who played Holden in Beyond, he ended up being a vampire and everything. So, like I said, there's been so many familiar actors popping up in this. I'm like, dude, you. So, like I said, I get giddy about that stuff, because it always bothers me when I recognize an actor in something and I can't remember what they're from. That's a conversation I've had many a time over all of these different reviews. But regardless, once again, my tangent and everything. But I liked it. There was this interesting conversation that, when the guy was shooting Castiel, of like, oh yeah, it's like you small men in powerful positions who think you kind of run things. I think because obviously Dean had called him up, because obviously it's like, well, he had to cover his cover as an FBI agent, so he gave him Dean's number, and Dean was like, yeah, let me talk to my FBI agent. It's like, have you seen, we've been trying to contact you, I know, did you hear any of Sam's messages? Well, the fact is, God's back in the picture, watch your back. Fact is, idiot, like, basically, like, listen to your messages next time. So it's in his mind that, like, God's back in the picture. And obviously, as an angel, God's, whole thing of kind of manipulating everything and everyone, it hits you a certain way that, yeah, it hits humans a certain way, but it hits you a certain way too, especially because, it's like, as one of his angels, the fact of the matter is, you've always thought things are kind of clear cut in one direction and they end up being in a completely other, especially because Castiel's come to have an affinity for humans. He's been around them for so long, but then also finding out, like, holy crap, like, all the terrible stuff that's happened to the humans that I've come to care about is because of all this, so it puts all a sour taste in his mouth. And I think that's what kind of pissed him off, to the point, like, it was very vicious, him killing the monster this episode, kind of stabbing over and over again. But obviously, like, they're like, whoa, because Melly and her son are seeing the fact that his wound had healed from the gunshot wounds, and he ends up healing her son's leg, but you can tell that it was draining on him. So once again, their power comes from God. He's in a weakened state, so I think not just Castiel, I think all angels are getting weaker. But it could be Castiel specifically, because it might be some twisted thing of like, well, no, because I was about to say, like, not let you find out angels that turn against God. Well, because we've never actually had any angels directly. Well, I mean, we had people kind of going against God, but no one's ever challenged God like that, except for, like, his sister. But, like, I mean, angels. So I was like, not unless it's a thing of, like, once angels take up arms against him, they start losing their power. Once again, we haven't really dabbled with the other angels, like the few that are still around and everything. Like, once again, we haven't even touched, like, well, we've kind of dealt a little bit with what's going on downstairs to us tiny bit, because obviously it's a fight for the crown and everything down there, who's going to reign over the throne and everything. But then what about everything topside? And I didn't even think about it too. I was like, oh, there was also the thing of like, well, let's not forget too, God is also the one that killed Jack, so that's another, like, thing too, just, with Castiel as well. But regardless, getting back to what I was saying, like, him losing his powers, and it looked like he had to kind of push himself just to do something as simple as healing. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But he was like, you honestly don't want to know, Melly, the truth about everything. Because it's like, oh, are you a miracle sent by God? And it's like, yeah, at one point in time, Castiel probably would have taken that as praise. But now it's kind of like, no, don't even associate me with God, So there's that whole thing, like I said. But for him, it's like, this whole situation reminded him that, the job isn't done. Despite whatever he's feeling right now, he needs to kind of basically get into the game because the fight isn't over yet. So There's plenty of people out there in need, and the fact of the matter is, either this means he is going to go back to meet up with the Winchesters, or he's going to venture out on his own, because it's like, hey, I can't just hide away, because there's plenty of people like me and the Winchesters might have our issues, but the fact of the matter is, there's still people out there that needs my help, and I'm part of this fight too. I'm a hunter as well, so I'm gonna go out and help people. So that might be the angle they're setting up with Cassio, or like I said, he might go back, with Sam and Dee. And despite how they feel about it, it's like, I need to get the job done, despite it getting God isn't done yet. So that, whatever the case may be, it might be a combination of the two. I'm very, very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Because this whole situation does kind of get me wondering, are we really done with Rowena? Is it so clear cut and dry? I don't think so, especially because the whole thing of them killing off Catch as well. I feel like I brought it up, because they had their little bit of a thing, and I'm like, maybe there's something along those lines, kind of dealing with whatever goes down in hell. I think we'll probably get more information on that going forward. Maybe not, but I get the feeling we're not completely done with Rowena just quite yet. But like I said, we'll have to wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legacies, a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, there's a whole complicated thing of obviously the continuation of like, Lizzie keeping Hope secret, and obviously, Lizzie's kind of fine with like, hey, you should be like flirting with other people, because obviously if you're not going to tell them the truth and everything, because obviously you kind of move past that point where you're like, they're happy together, so you don't want to ruin things. So it's like, okay, she's like, so I'd rather us kind of spend time. It's like, it leaves us more time to spend together. And I love hoping like, okay, everything else in that sentence made sense except for that, because even I was caught off guard. I'm like, Lizzie wanted to spend time with Hope? Okay, what's going on here? I know you're like kind of new besties and stuff like that, but still. But it was like, because it's like, if I spend more time with you, I'm less likely to spend time with Josie and end up spilling the beans about your secret. So that was kind of her explanation for it. And I do like that this episode is pushing the boundaries that the rules are different with. And it seems like our characters are now aware of the rules are different with Malivore, because before it was only one monster at a time, but now it seems like there's multiple, and I guess that has something to do with whatever Clark's situation is. I guess he's kind of gained some of Malivore's abilities, so he acts as a different portal. So Malivore is one portal, and then I guess Clark acts as another, so like he can pull creatures out while his dad pulls them out. So it might be that type of thing, because we do see that Clark has the symbol on his head, if I remember correctly, so maybe that kind of translates. Because at first, because the way his body shifted, it never did that before last season. So that's why I'm kind of wondering if he either gained a portion of Malivore's body or power, or maybe Malivore is kind of like existing through. I don't know what that whole situation is. That's still kind of a big question. But obviously, this episode, they got a zombie running around, which they quickly deal with that. They kind of lock it up. But at the same time, they're dealing with a Croatian, which is kind of interesting. And I love that, like, for one, Caleb's sister, Kim, is there. She acting as bait to get Sebastian out in the open and everything. Also, she's like, I want to spend time here because it's like vampires, witches, and werewolves. It's like such a cool thing going down there, but Caleb was like, there's nothing crazy's going down. But then you have like MG and Lizzie working together to take down the zombie, and she's telling Caleb, like, you were saying, he was just like, he couldn't even say that, because it's like, yeah, there's always something going down at the Salvatore school, of course. So I thought that was all pretty dope. And obviously everyone kind of separating a little bit, like Lizzie going off with Landon, and it's like, if I get too worried about spilling secrets, I just bring up some Star Wars and he'll talk on and on and on, and later on we see that it turns out to be a matter of fact. But obviously you have Landon trying to be a good wingman to Roth, trying to send him off with Hope, which is like, oh, that gets more and more complicated and twisted, especially when we consider everything that Josie's doing this episode. She goes and visits Freya in New Orleans. I was like, oh my God, because it like, she explains it later on, because I kept wondering whose journal that was. It was Penelope. It was a thing that Penelope had done so that, like, whatever, I forgot, because that was something I vaguely remember it from season 1. I just couldn't remember it fully, but I think it was the type of thing, like, I guess anything that she writes, because I was wondering why it seemed like it was getting filled in, but I guess it's like anything Lizzie writes with that pen, or whoever writes with that pen, it kind of translates into that notebook. So obviously Landon's lyrics that he had written about hope, he had written them with that pen, and obviously she must have started writing with that pen. So that's how Josie figured that whole thing out. It's kind of like, wow, Penelope's not even around, and still kind of causing a little havoc. But I guess in a weird way you could almost say that it kind of works out. Then in a twisted way, Penelope is still kind of looking out for Josie like she always has. That basically Josie needed to know the truth. Well, because basically the whole situation pushed Josie to be, she goes to learn a spell that could basically help. It's basically what she took from that Oni last episode. It puts her in a position where she can now, not the last episode, but the episode before last. Now because of all of that, she can now take that magic and make it so that they get rid of Malevor's magic that gets rid of everyone's memory. But, it's a complicated thing because she's learning this from Freya, but then she's looking at the picture of Freya and hoping Freya catches on. She's like, you know who that is, don't you? Who is she and what's her connection to me? You were hiding stuff from me because you haven't 100% decided what you want to do with the spell, because she had made a point to tell, if you're not careful with the spell, instead of recovering everyone's memories, you'll erase them forever. And that was the thing of Josie was caught between like, well, what should I do? And she ended up knocking Freya out the moment Freya kind of confronted her. Freya did bring up an interesting bit of dialogue because she was like, the Salvatore School, I'm familiar with it. Me and my wife are thinking about sending our child there. I'm like, oh my God, you and Keelan had a kid, right? And then it clicked in my head. I was like, I'm stupid. That was like one of the things in the series finale. They were asking Vincent to be the dad. I was like, right, I forgot about that. And it's like, oh, I didn't know you have a child and everything. You have a son. And I'm like, oh, that's super adorable. I love that. That's so cool. That's so good. I thought that was so beautiful, dude. So I thought that was pretty, just kind of a little bit of information. I mean, it's not the only thing we learned in this episode. Obviously, Alaric gets brought in by the sheriff because obviously she's a little pissed at him. It's like, well, you didn't meet up with me when you claimed you would. He's like, yeah, but I was dealing with my daughter, trying to figure things out, trying to let go of them, trying not to be held on so tight. But obviously she wasn't as forgiving. But then obviously we know that Clark killed those people at that bar, and obviously Alaric looks like a suspect because he was there. And obviously she's bringing him in, and he's like, all right, if you want to talk to somebody, call this person. And it's Matt. I'm like, so now we know. I was wondering, like, okay, so Matt's not sheriff anymore. What happened to, because he's mayor now, because of course he would be, because that puts him in the biggest position where he has the biggest resources to kind of look after the town in a supernatural. Well, I think, he's probably continuing what he's done before. He's trying to make sure what has gone down before, prior to him becoming sheriff and everything. He's trying to, probably keep everything in Mystic Falls in order. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But I also like that moment at the end where Alaric is like, all right, I'm going to tell you the truth about everything. Supernatural creatures, they're real, they exist. The fact of the matter is, I'm telling you all this because I want, part of me, the fact is I really care about you. I would tell you just to pack up and leave and never come back to Mystic Falls. But I need someone like you on law enforcement side of things, so that when I say to let things go, just to kind of ignore, like, basically, he wants her to become the new Sheriff Forbes. Because Matt was kind of like, and he was okay with his supernatural. He leaned more being anti-supernatural. We brought that up before. But you take Sheriff Forbes, she was the one that was obviously she was besties with Damon Salvatore, which it speaks volumes in itself. But she was the one that was okay with keeping that balance eventually. So he was hoping that our new sheriff would kind of be like that. But she's like, I can't trust you either, just because she doesn't know him well enough, or the fact that, because obviously and that was enough, I guess, because I was wondering like what he was going to do with that, like. But he's like, I'm sorry about this. So he's making Caleb make her forget all about the supernatural stuff. Because the fact of the matter is, I mean, not unless she's got vervain in her system, which I wouldn't assume she would. I mean, to be fair, you never know. Matt could be making sure that everyone has vervain in their system. But I think they would have made a point of that later on if that was the case. But I think it's a whole thing of like, well, he wanted to know where they could stand. So it's like, obviously that's not going to work. So maybe he's going to try and get her fired and get someone else to kind of fill her position. That might be the type of thing that ends up happening. Or it might be a thing of he'll just keep his distance from her and just be like, all right, I can't work with her, can't let her find out about what's going on here, because she won't be so inclined to work with us. Maybe she'll change her mind later on. I'm curious to really see what they end up doing with that angle of things. So, because obviously, let's not forget, her kids go to Mystic Fall High too. So, which there was almost this little budding kind of thing happening between her son and Hope, because that was kind of cute. But yeah, so there's that. There's Lizzie and Landon, who were spending time together in this episode, which is also really interesting because they don't normally spend a lot of time together. I love when they were having that little meeting and stuff like that. It's like, because Caleb's like, yo, who's this Hope lady? How's she know about Malivore and all this? Oh yeah, she killed a different monster. She helped kill the Oni, the Ogre, the Minotaur. It was like, she's like, well, it was actually me who killed that Minotaur. And then Landon's like, there was a Minotaur? Because he was like about to nerd out and everything, and she's like, not everything is about you. And he's almost like, what? I just love that was the line. That was so good. I was like, it's not not everything is about you, Landon. Jeez. But nevertheless, it is the whole thing of like trying to keep him from knowing the truth, but at the same time, because he's asking questions about Hope and stuff like that. But it's like, no, I'm asking for my boy Ralph, and I keep saying Raphael, but still. And she's like, oh, good, because the last thing I want is you staring at someone else when you're my sister. It's like, especially when and she made a metaphor to sex, and he's like, well, no, if it's actually none of your business, but we didn't do it. She's like, what? This changes everything. But that kind of gets Landon being like, well, this is about Hope, isn't it? And then the monster, the Croatian, ends up attacking. It's really interesting. It's basically what was it they called it? It's kind of like a cross between a Venus flytrap. It'll kind of numb you so like you won't scream for help with its like nose, and then it dissolves you and because it's a cross between a Venus flytrap and apparently like an octopus, and it dissolves you in like acid or something like that. Pretty brutal. And the moment it started, it's like, well, it's not coming after me. Landon was like, it's coming after you. And it's like, oh, why is it going after Lizzie? Then my mom went like, it's going after people's secrets, right? And lo and behold, it turns out, because I was like, that's the one thing that I was like, why go after Lizzie? Isn't the whole thing supposed to be going like, because despite its main motivation being like, oh, it's supposed to go after Landon, it's driven by its original instinct, which is so interesting that wasn't played up a little. Well, it was played up, but like, that's a very interesting thing. Even though it had its motives and its thing of Malivore being like, yo, get me Landon, the fact is its initial, what it was originally made for, took priority. Its need to go after people with secrets who are lying. I thought that was so fascinating that takes priority over Malivore's orders. I guess your own supernatural instincts of what you were made for kick in like that. I just thought that was kind of, fascinating. And before Lizzie could open her mouth, Hope had showed up and like closed her mouth again. And it's like, okay. But now it complicates things, and I love the back and forth between Lizzie and Hope about who their secrets. Hope brings up the fact is like, oh, this special thing of yours, I lost it. She's like, oh, I really love that. When we were 14, I kind of had a crush on Josie for like a week, and you have Lizzie being like, you two will never, ever be a thing, which is kind of adorable. Her being like, you almost being like, I guess it's a thing, it'd be a weird thing because it's like, you're kind of my bestie and kind of almost like another sister to me. I would never want you to be with my actual sister. Whatever the case may be. I think it's probably just kind of like, nah, Josie's too good for you. It might be kind of more so that, but I love that. And I love the whole thing of like her being like, oh, I actually accidentally killed your hamster because I tried to siphon magic off of you to pass a test or whatever. And I never want to admit it, but I actually think you're actually pretty cool. I was like, that's adorable. Like her being like, yeah, I actually think you're actually pretty cool, Hope. I think that's always why she had issue with Hope, because, it's that thing of like, you kind of admire and you like Hope, and I think she kind of hated that she liked and admired Hope. But I thought that was kind of neat. But when Josie shows up, I was like, okay, so what is Josie going to do? And the moment everyone passes out, it's like, that could either go either way, because it might not go after them anymore because they might not have any memories of Hope, so that gets rid of the lie. But then I'm like, no, she restored everyone's memories. Landon remembers, he's like, Hope. And I love later on when the creature's after him and Hope saves him, he's like, Hope Michelson. And she's like, we really don't have time for this. It's like, really? You've been back this entire time and you didn't tell me anything? She's like, really? We're not going to be doing this right now. And I love that's how MG was able to find him, because it's like, yeah, you two arguing, I literally heard you all the way over there, so that's how I was able to find you. But it's also interesting how this all ties together, because there's romantic elements. It seems like there's a little bit of something between him and Kim, but I think for one, Caleb made it clear of like, you're my family, so stay the hell away from my sister. But also the thing is, I think it might be the complicated thing of he's still in love with Lizzie, and that's not the easiest thing to kind of get over. But also he's been hiding the fact is he never told Lizzie like, hey, the dude you were seeing in your head wasn't just all in your head, it was actually a vampire and he's away. I even love the fact is they've made a little note to be like, don't worry, Wade isn't dead. I love it. It's like, I didn't kill Wayne. You didn't kill Wayne. Is that actually his name? I love that. That's a bit, and you feel so bad for Wade. It's like no one remembers your damn name, dude. That's so a shame. That's such a shame. But hey, they were getting revenge for you, even though they were getting revenge for Wayne and not Wade. But regardless, I love that whole bit, you know. But it was really interesting because it turns out, like, obviously Sebastian was back then during those times, and basically he was going around, you know, killing people, you know, doing his vampire thing. And obviously, you know, she created a monster. Well, because initially the people in town were trying to find the monster, you know, that was killing all these people, and she ended up figuring out it was him. So to protect him, she created this creature, the Croatoan, to make it so that it would go find all the other people's secrets. And I love that, actually, and I like them tying that into historically being like, that's why all the people from Roanoke disappeared. They were all killed by the Croatian. So I thought that was kind of fascinating to kind of like take that historical legend and story. I'm saying legend, but it was like a real thing, or at least now it's kind of a legend just because it's been passed down throughout the history, but it is kind of history. But to know that it's kind of like, oh, that history has a supernatural twist to it. And she actually got rid of, she's the one that put him in that position, kind of had him locked up, well, put him out of, like, put Sebastian out of commission like that because it was her way of protecting him. I was like, oh, that's sweet. But I was also wondering, I was like, oh, so what about Cassandra? Oh, apparently she got ripped to pieces. So that necklace was meant to protect him from it. So it was used as the focus of the spell and was able to kill the Croatian, which burned like the Wicked Witch. Well, not burned, melted like the Wicked Witch from Wizard of Oz. So that was interesting. I was like, oh, and almost had maybe that's kind of also what they were going for, because aesthetically it kind of looks like the Wicked Witch, especially like the long nose and everything. But still, it was just kind of an interesting thing. This is a very, very complicated situation all around, because first and foremost, there's the whole thing of like, well, now that everyone remembers Hope, and that's the sad thing about it, is because Hope didn't want this to happen, because she figured this exact thing would happen because everyone kind of moved on, and now that no one remembered her, you can make the argument maybe she made things worse. That's the thing. Sadly, Hope is, you know, and I think you can make the argument she kind of gets it from her parents. She kind of has a bit of a martyr complex. Because the fact of the matter, she tries to do the right thing. And she thought because she thought, like, no matter how much it hurts me, everyone else in my life is better off without me. Granted, they weren't. And so it just led to things going down these paths. So obviously the pain that Josie's in, for one, the fact is that her and Landon are in this complicated situation. Because for her, she figured out because of the journal and everything, but she went to visit Freya because she wanted someone that was connected to Hope. Because for her, to remind her to not be selfish. Because it's like, yeah, this is all about what I want, sure, but I need to realize that Hope has an entire family who's missing a piece of their heart. Like, us is one thing, which, yeah, we kind of feel that hole and that emptiness, especially Landon kind of felt it without really realizing it, but her whole family will see there's a picture of her and not know who she is, you know. So especially after everything that family's already lost to, the Michelson family. So, you know, but for, you know, I thought it was kind of neat, you know, for her to kind of put her own stuff aside to be like, I did it also because, you know, I need a reminder of, like, her family is missing a piece of their life because they don't remember she exists. And so Landon is like, that's further proof of you being the unselfish person. I didn't need my memories to remember that. But it's like, where do they go from here? Landon's like, I need time to figure things out, because obviously he cares about Josie, but it's like everything with Hope as well. And then on the sad side, the other continued sad side of things, Raphael can't be around Hope because getting his memories back, because even without his memories, he already liked Hope. So that was already bad enough, like when everyone's got their memory back. But on top of you already liking her without your memories, you realize that you had really, really like her. And now it's like, Landon's done so much for me. Like, the fact is, he did everything he could to revert me back to being human. And so to pay him back, I can't be around you. Like, that was already something last season, and now it's just coming back even more so now because the opportunity has brought itself up, because that was something he wasn't even willing to admit last season, but now he is willing to. And well, I think he admitted it a bit last season, but I think he fully admits it this season, and he just kind of It's like, yeah, him and Hope, so it kind of leaves her a little alone now because any friendship she had with Josie is kind of in a very complicated thing. And obviously Lizzie, whatever they have is going to be a little complicated because obviously Lizzie's going to be there for Josie, because if Lizzie's there with Hope, that's going to be a whole complicated thing, because Josie's like, you should have told me about Hope the moment you remembered her. It's like, well, yeah, you didn't come to me about Hope when you remembered her either, so we are both kind of at fault here. But it's like, no more secrets, which you have MG bringing Sebastian to her, so that's going to turn into a thing, which is interesting because now it brings their story kind of full circle, because it's like, well, it's kind of like Damon's situation. Well, Damon and Stefan, because like they were both in love with Katerina and they both ended up falling in love with Elena, who looked a lot like Katerina. So maybe the whole thing is going to be that Cassandra looks a little bit like because didn't he reference that before, that she looked like the person? Maybe not, maybe that's just me completely making BS up, but I'm sure that's kind of the angle they're going for, of like, oh yeah, like he happens to fall in love with a witch present day, so it makes me kind of think like, there might be something to that, maybe not, I don't know. So that's going to be a complicated thing for MG, especially because it's like, well, potentially there's something between you and Kim, because Kim definitely likes you, but you don't want to take those steps because of Caleb, but also I think it's also because of the Lizzie situation, which now that's developing with this whole Sebastian situation. So there's just so much going on here. But at the very least, there was some good that comes about it, because at the end Freya shows up, and even though Hope was there alone, Freya, like, despite everything, there was some good coming out of everyone getting their memories back, because now her family remembers her. Freya comes there to check on her and they're able to hug. So it's like, that was kind of that's honestly an angle of this I didn't even consider to think about. Like, right, her family doesn't remember her either. Side note, if you were curious, I brought this up, like, I think last episode, of like, oh yeah, certain somebody popping up. Freya was what I figured as much, because I saw like a small glimpse of this episode last week. I saw a glimpse of it, the preview, and I saw Freya. That's why I didn't want to talk. That's why I wish I hadn't seen it, because I saw that, read that somewhere. I don't remember, somewhere I came across that information online that Freya was going to pop up this season. I don't know how much of this season she's going to be in, but the fact is, even just in this one episode, I kind of get the feeling like we might be seeing her more, because Freya's probably going to be the one to kind of help her out with this whole Malivore thing, because she's kind of the key to defeating Malivore, so she's probably going to have to go to her aunt for help with trying to figure this whole situation out, which is obviously, that's also another complicated thing, because, like, well, obviously, like, Hope and your boy Landon have to figure some things out, but it's also like, well, there's a complicated thing of like, well, I got to figure out a way to stop your dad. Obviously, they don't realize that his brother Clark is here pretending to be their principal, and that's going to be a whole thing. But we also see, once again, the people in the robes and everything, who that is. We see at least one this episode, but obviously we've seen previously there was another one, so it's like, okay, who is that? And whoever it is, they were using, I guess they're the ones who summoned the zombie. And it seems like, I guess the zombie left its eye back at the school, because they're using that to view and spy on people in the school, which that's another angle to this. There is a lot to this. I was almost feeling bad. I was like, oh, that sucked if they killed the sheriff's kid. But then my mind immediately goes like, the fact is he's running there and the zombies there. Part of me was like, don't tell me both of her kids are connected to all this. But it turns out not to be the case, so I'm interested to find out who's under the hood. Like I said, it seems like those are separate things, while it also seems like they're the same thing. The two people in the hood, are they connected to the whole Clark thing? Yes, no, because they made the whole symbol for Malivore. So it might just be the thing of Clark isn't Clark anymore, that he is purely Malivore, and someone else kind of summoned him up and just kind of potentially using him. I'm so curious to figure that out, because there's a lot to probably unravel with that, but a lot to unravel with all these other aspects of this episode. So I am very curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward. And now moving on to this week's episode of Evil. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, obviously picking up with last week's episode, obviously they're looking at the symbols that all represent the 60, and now obviously they want to take time to kind of investigate. They kind of bring this up to the Monsignor and everything, which he gives them a little leeway with this investigation. Obviously the next symbol they're investigating is related to David's father. Now, what was interesting is that we never actually found out what it was, but David basically had a falling out with his dad 5 years ago, where he was basically, and it's something his dad kind of brings up later on of like, we kind of had our little fork in the road, but they never really go into what that was exactly. All that David said was that his dad can be kind of a bit of a bastard or something like that, so... What's interesting though is casting news and casting connections and stuff like that's really interesting. Obviously, once again, Mike Coulter played Luke Cage on the Netflix Marvel TV show. Well, Luke Cage. What's interesting though is the actor who plays his dad played Ben Urich in season 1 of Daredevil on Netflix. So just like, oh, that's just interesting connections and like that. Which once again, I also bring up the fact is the actress who plays Simone, the actress who played Misty Knight, is also on a CBS show. It's just once again, it's just the whole connection. I'm pretty sure even the actor who played Bullseye in season 3 of Daredevil, I'm pretty sure he's on that show on All Rise too. So that's why I'm like, dude, the connections are up the wazoo. And you kind of think about that. Granted, I'm crossing over to other shows and I'm going off on the tangent, but I just think I always find that stuff interesting. But I think it's interesting too because like obviously we see his dad. His dad's a very like carefree guy because apparently he's kind of got like a group that he kind of like I don't know. I wouldn't even call it a cult, but it's like a group of people. He has basically kind of 2 wives. He has Esther and Corey, and Esther has another child. And it's kind of like, huh. And it seems like for him, it seems like something went down because even David was trying to get at it because he was like, yeah, Dad, like something happened 3 years ago where this symbol started popping up in your art and stuff like that. Because we also find out like Esther ends up using it in her pottery and whatnot. But it's like, okay, so the symbol came from Esther. So that's the confusing thing. Like neither one was really kind of explaining. Because obviously like whatever it was, something went down that led David down the path to being a priest. Whereas it led his dad down this path to being an artist. Like both of them kind of like finding their own way through whatever it is that went through. I was wondering if it has something to do with his mom. Like that's a conversation that never came up during the episode was David's mom. So that might be something, which is interesting. Obviously, I think the title of this episode is Two Fathers from what I was reading. And so like, obviously this has to deal with like Andy coming back, Kristen's husband. We'll kind of get to that side of things soon enough. But obviously like everything with David's dad, is where we're focusing on now. But I think it's kind of interesting because it's like, I don't know, like there's the correlations between that obviously is kind of like dads and their children because obviously Andy spends time with his kids and obviously David and his dad are kind of rekindling something there, which I think I referenced that in this regard too is just interesting. I won't go, it'll be another tangent so it's not worth going down. But what was also interesting though is that Kristen and David are high because basically their drinks were spiked with something, so, and it led to them both kind of tripping balls a little bit. What was interesting is David ended up seeing this woman named Annie, and even I was like, okay, that's interesting. She's got those marks on her. My mind was immediately like, okay, is this actually is some kind of culty thing, and things are bad here, but she's barefoot and everything. It's like, what's up with this? She tells about the fact that David has her dad's eyes, and David has his dad's eyes and everything, and I'm like, what's up with this? And then David, looks into it and finds out, well, he learns from his dad that the woman he saw was one of their ancestors. She was a former slave and everything. It's like, so he saw an ancestral spirit because like obviously they were doing kind of like a ritual and stuff like that. So maybe if you're kind of spiritually inclined as David is, because even he's like, well, he believes in an afterlife. So I guess he's like, I guess I believe in ghosts. So maybe it's a thing of because him being a religious person. I mean, to be fair, we know that him getting high lets him see stuff, kind of the more supernatural realm of things. So maybe this is more so a continuation of that. Like if he gets high, he can see stuff that normal people wouldn't. Maybe he's a little more connected. His visions, maybe he sees more of the supernatural world. I mean, I guess his visions, they manifest themselves in many different ways. Maybe this is just another manifestation of it, so maybe, I don't know. But it was interesting because obviously his dad was aware of it too. So it's kind of like, oh, that was interesting. He knew exactly who David was talking about when David brought it up. And it ends up getting revealed that symbol, that sigil he uses in his paintings and stuff like that was originally the slave master that owned Annie that was his. And obviously for David, it's like, no, the symbol wasn't about you that's evil. The symbol itself, because it's a symbol of hate, it was a symbol used by a man who put other people under his control. But obviously for David's dad, he has a different perspective. Whereas David kind of sees the history that symbol has, David's dad kind of finds encouragement there. He took that symbol that was connected to evil and made it his own. It was a symbol that represented resilience, that despite everything, here, look at how much stuff has changed, and the fact is that we were not kept down, that despite everything that was kind of thrown at us, here we are today, kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. So I guess it kind of shows that these sigils can start off as evil, but they don't have to be, as long as you don't give into it. But then there's everything with what Kristen saw, because Esther gave birth to like some demonic ghoul looking thing, and I'm like, that's gnarly. So it's like, is that just because she was high off her ass, or was there something to that? Because obviously Esther and, you know, David's dad used that symbol, so it makes you think like, okay, so there is some connection there. Maybe not. It seems like this is kind of a one-off. It seems like they're not even going to bring this up to the Monsignor, because it's like, how much we saw, how can we really say, bring any of that up, because we were kind of high the entire time, so we can't really. But I don't know, maybe the sigils aren't as clear cut, or showing that there is some gray levels to that. Maybe if you get to it in time, maybe the evil can be swayed to be something else. That maybe the evil that the symbol represents loses its power because of what David's dad is doing with the symbol, of what it represents to him, that basically it gives him almost some form of control, maybe. I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing. I'm curious to see where they kind of take that going forward, if they kind of go forward with that any more than they already have. There might not be another angle to that. I just think that's just fascinating all on its own. And like I said, the whole thing with Kristen is just kind of, I guess we're just chalking it up to her being high. Maybe the baby just turned out to be normal. We'll never know. Once again, I like that this show does kind of keep things a little like, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Kind of keeps things. Truth be told is, you definitely go like, this has to be real, all this supernatural stuff. But other stuff kind of makes, once again, like George and everything, and, you know, Kristen's dream, you kind of like, I don't know, man. It's a recurring thing that keeps happening over and over again, even though you know in your brain that like, oh, you potentially got that from like a movie, but it's like you don't remember watching the movie, but maybe it's something you subconsciously picked up over. But it's like, why now? And you know, so it's just, I don't know. I guess maybe you could make the argument because of the time she spent with David. Obviously, she doesn't look at things from the demonic point of view like David and the Monsignor do, but obviously for her, from a psychological standpoint, she believes that these sociopaths, or, you know, psychopaths, are using these symbols to kind of gather up and everything. So there's that. Kind of going a little lighthearted, let's go over to Ben's side of things, which apparently I love that his entire side of the episode is that ghost hunting show. He basically has to do ADR for not ADR. What is it? Maybe it is. I don't remember. It's basically when you have to like go in a booth later on and do what he's doing. We had to add additional dialogue. I think that's what it is. Isn't it additional dialogue recordings? I'm sure I'm confusing it with something else. I don't remember the word, but it's a thing that happens for movies and stuff like that. So it's interesting. He has to basically dub over himself to kind of clean up like the kind of like what he said. It's like, and they were like, we'll just fix that in post. And they kind of have to haphazardly piece it together. And he was like, the fact is, the way you cut this, it's like, oh, we kind of had to save time, but it's like, that's not what I said. So he's pissed off because he has to read the line a certain way because Vanessa didn't get in contact with him, but now he's in contact. Well, Vanessa shows up and everything, so he's a little mad about it. But then, like, she's like, yeah, you ignored me for a month. He's like, what are you talking about? I called you like 3 times. She's like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, oh, did something spooky happen? And then he shows her the phone number. She's like, yeah, that's not my phone number. Like, I forgot what the word she said exactly, but I'm wondering, is it supposed to be the thing of like numbers were switched around, or is it supposed to be that thing where like each number in her number was 1 digit off? Is that what kind of like the whole thing? So I was like, oh, maybe something spooky going on there. Whatever the case may be. I did kind of like the cute moment they had of kind of giving the middle finger to home dude running the whole shop, because all that extra work they went through was down the toilet, because it's like, oh, he was pitching up Ben's voice, trying to make him seem more cowardly and stuff like that during the recording, and she didn't like that because she was like, yeah, you're only doing this to people of color or whatever. So she didn't approve. She kind of called him out for some racist shit, and they ended up bouncing because she's like, yeah, try and fire me. We'll see how like the top dogs, according to all this, like, feel about you doing that. So go back to her place and to get to kissing and making out. I thought it was also cute because she was like basically at Comic-Con, because she is a bit of a celebrity, that people kind of dress up like her as, cosplay and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. They get to making out. I was like, oh man. It was like, oh. But Ben being Ben couldn't forget. He was like, now are you sure there was something, like maybe there was another reason why you didn't give me your number? You're married. You're in a relationship already. No, I think it was like, he's like, you have a boyfriend already. She's like, no, it's nothing like that. And he's like, what is it then? And she's like, it was my sister. My mind went like, oh my God, you have a twin sister. You had switched places or something like that. It was like, no, it wasn't even that. It was the fact that she was kind of like, yeah, my sister's kind of like, she died when she was young, so she's kind of stitched to me here like a phantom limb or something. I thought at first, like, when she started kind of going down the room, I was like, oh, you had a twin sister, you absorbed in a wound type of situation. I thought that's kind of what it might have been. And she told my sister's grafted. I was like, oh, and then I was like, okay, so no, your sister was in it. Something happened and your sister became a part of you because she's literally grafted to you. But she meant like, no, like my sister's spirit's kind of with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's interesting. And obviously Ben being who he is, where he doesn't kind of believe that stuff, it ends up in a complicated thing of like, obviously he's arguing it, which he's like, okay, you want to point at things scientifically. It's like, oh, things are scientifically proven. But it's like, when you think about how things work on a scientific level, how can you really say that's even more credible than my situation? But then Ben kind of shuts his mouth because he's like, he starts looking at her and it's like, man, she's super, he doesn't say this, but the way he was looking at her, it's like, there's a beautiful woman in front of me. I need to shut my damn mouth type of situation. And he's like, you're right. But he couldn't help that while they were making out, he kept thinking of it. And I love that he called David, and David gets a phone call from God. I'm like, what the? I was like, oh, is that supposed to be something? And he's like, it said I got a call from God. And Ben's like, oh, right, I forgot. I changed that. I'm like, that's such a little, I guess that was supposed to be his little joke on David, where he's like, oh, David thinks he's actually getting a call from God. But it's like, no, seriously, I need your advice in this situation. And obviously David tells him, it's like, I get it. Because for Ben, it's like, the fact is, there's a beautiful woman here. You don't need to give in. Like, not everything has to be questioned. But because he's a very questioning dude when it comes to this whole situation, obviously they're like, that's what his job is. Like, oh, that's not just his job, but that's where his beliefs lie when it comes to this whole working with David and Kristen type of thing. Like, he leans more towards Kristen, where he doesn't believe in all this supernatural stuff. So obviously that stuff with Vanessa doesn't necessarily resonate. So he's asking for advice about this whole situation because it's like, I like her, but what should I do? Which David offers up the advice of like, the world is weird. The fact of the matter is, you got to decide what you're going to do with that. Just accept it. It's just kind of like, yeah, her situation might be weird, but literally everyone in the world is weird. Everything in the world is weird. I literally just saw my ancestor from over 100 years ago. So it's like, yeah, the world is wild. So we never found out what happened after that. Maybe next time we'll get to see, but that's definitely an interesting side story to go down. And then the other side of things is Andy popping back. That was actually really interesting, and I guess that was kind of the purpose of adding because obviously there is that tension between Kristen and David. You even see it when they're dancing and stuff. Like, I was almost halfway expecting them to kiss. Almost halfway expected like Kristen to accidentally answer her phone. Like, maybe she'll like, something will happen and her phone get answered while she's with David or something like that. Unfortunately, nothing like that happened. Luckily, even despite being drunk, or rather high, they were able to kind of like not let anything happen, because I think there's enough of their brains to be like, we can't let something like this happen, because obviously he's a priest, she's a married woman. That'd be a very complicated situation, Obviously, like, her friend made a reference to like the whole Fleabag situation, but obviously this is a little different because that's just kind of like, well, Fleabag situation is her situation and he's a hot priest. That was a complicated situation. This is even more complicated. Once again, she's a married woman, he's a priest, and the whole like, sex stuff, so there's that whole thing. So the entire episode lends it, well, in that side of things, because obviously, like, oh, his daughters are so happy to see him and everything. And I love that he's looking at, like, all the measurements and stuff of, like, oh, man, my kids, look how tall they've gotten. And then you see one say Ben the Magnificent. He doesn't look too happy about seeing that. I'm like, oh, you're thinking that's a new guy. And she's like, oh, who's mommy been bringing around my, bringing around my girls, type of situation. I did like the element of his oldest being, because she is old enough to kind of recognize, like, it's that thing of like, he's going from time to time, but I guess when you're younger, you're just always happy to see him, so it's never a thing. But now she's older, she recognizes it now, of like, you were gone for like 3 months, you've been gone for long periods of time before, but this was like the longest time. And it's just like, and it was even something, Kristen's mom threw in his face about the whole thing of like, you were gone for so long. The fact is, you know, Kristen had to handle things on her own because it, you know, it shows like, it's like you're the father and everything, but you're being very irresponsible, leaving your wife to kind of deal with all 4 of your kids alone. She lost her job. She got a new job. Like there's a lot that went down in her life and you weren't there to kind of help her and be there for her to kind of carry that load. She had to carry everything on her own, which was also interesting because Andy walked in on her having sex, and the moment she referenced, she's like, yeah, I don't think Kristen would be too happy about my boyfriend. Because at first I was like, we didn't see it, but that was Leland, wasn't it? And then she even says it later on about like, yeah, she's not too keen on me having a boyfriend because she wants me to be alone. It's like, no, because she told you your boyfriend is a sociopath who went out of his way to meet up with you. But like I said, I think Leland kind of, you know, I feel crass saying this, but the whole like basically kind of put the devil in her in a sense, which I don't mean for that to sound as crass it is, but that's the best way to put it, because like he kind of dabbled in, like I think he kind of awoken a little darkness in her that basically, you know, once again, like I said, you can interpret that scene as him kind of damning her soul, but the fact is, I think it was more so like her inhibitions are a little lower. She's willing to kind of give into her desires a little bit more, even when being like, we don't see who it is. It could be a thing of like, oh, that is just some random dude, but because it might have been too much if they threw Leland in it, but it could just be a thing of like, nah, it is Leland, but we're going to build up to that more in future episodes. So maybe that's the angle they're going. But like, obviously she's like, keep this hush hush, which is also interesting to see that Andy and her seriously don't get along because of the back and forth between them. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of glad you're getting laid because you'll finally get that, like, you know, stick up out of your ass, essentially. So I'm like, okay. So I'm curious, is it because of more recent situations of him not being there, or has there always been issues between Kristen's husband and her mom, you know? So, but what I did think was kind of pretty neat was I was like, oh, I guess because like obviously his door, because they kept bringing up, oh yeah, Ben the Magnificent, yeah, he's super cool, he's always here, yeah, he's helping fix anything mom needs, so he's always here help. Like you could tell his oldest was saying that just to kind of get under his skin, and it's like, yeah, so and you know, obviously Andy getting a little jealous, like, yo, so who's this Ben guy, you know, like I said, to see who mommy's been bringing around, right? But they get him to help play that game. Because it's about like, yeah, we deal with that. We win the game. We kind of get rid of all the evil spirits. And obviously, like, the daughter brings up, like, George and the dreams that their mom has been having, too, about everything. But luckily, they were able to, I guess because they weren't handling this on their own. So Rose is there, everything again. She kind of gets all monstrous and stuff. But the dad kind of was like, yeah, we're not listening to you. And they go over and they close it and say goodbye. So it makes you wonder, was it really acting as a portal? Because obviously George pre-existed that portal, not less subsequently it was actually open the entire time, but I feel like it got open because the game. So it's that thing of like, okay, so is this just a game? Because obviously Rose shows up again, so is she some because Ben tried to get rid of her before, but the screen got complicated just because she was fighting against him. So maybe someone's not being in control of Rose anymore, more like the same situation, or maybe their dad being there kind of made this a little different because it's easier to kind of scare a child, but not her. I almost thought things were going to get a little messy because obviously the kids reference what went down Halloween with that girl that, you know, and it's like, oh, one of us almost got buried alive and everything. I was like, oh, is this going to lead to like Andy to sound like, oh, I think I need to take custody of the kids. I thought it was going to turn into a nasty thing of that. Doesn't mean it won't turn into that eventually, because it might turn into a thing of like, yeah, everything that's going on, you're a little unstable, the job you're working, I don't know, that's going to bring up a lot of interesting questions. And obviously there's the awkward thing of like, oh yeah, you know, Kristen had that moment with David, she's like walking away super smiling and everything, and he's like, hey stranger, she's like, Andy. It's kind of like you're back. Oh, I'm so happy at you know, because it's like for a moment she kind of, I think it was that, you know, because it was something that kind of got thrown at her, was the whole fact is that obviously like she's had to take care of 4 kids by herself, so it was a moment of her being able to just walk away and just kind of like forget everything, like not worry about your marriage, because you know, because it's one thing, because like for one, your husband's far away on a mountain, he has been for a while, so I think it kind of lets you kind of forget for a little bit. And, you know, like, it's almost just feel like you're just on you. You only have to be concerned about yourself, your own happiness. But Andy being there kind of brought her, like, crumbling, like, not crumbling, but heading straight down to the ground, slamming right back into reality. So, very, very interesting stuff went down this episode. I am so excited to see where ultimately all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I think it's going to definitely get wild, especially with the whole Andy's return. I'm curious, is he going to slip up and bring up stuff about, her mom and boyfriend, and just that's going to turn into a complicated thing, or maybe he's going to keep hush-hush about it once again once he finds out what Kristen is doing for her job and stuff like that, what that means. Kind of weird and awkwardness that might exist between David and Kristen now that Andy's back in the picture, even though he was never out of the picture. It's going to be interesting. And also, once again, Ben and Vanessa, what happened there? Gots to know, so hopefully next episode will tell us all about all of that. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.